I just realized we're playing the Lions this week, and this is probably bad luck. But I needed the camera to focus. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Every week, I'm getting better and better at this. Grossi, and today we are going to be breaking down and predicting every single game in week 4 of the NFL. Last week, I went 11-5. Sorry. I've been really bad the past 2 weeks, bringing me to a 28-20 record on the season, which is not great, but looking to improve. However, two folks that are not looking to improve are two top predictors right now in the Pick'em League, link is in the description, who are 38-10. So a big shout out to you and good luck in the coming weeks. Now, last week, these are the games that I got incorrect. These are the ones I got right. And so, heading into this week, it's a clean slate, and let's get started. With Thursday Night Football, you got the Detroit Lions taking on the Green Bay mother-loving Packers. The Lions having an impressive win over the Falcons last week, and everything just looked pretty darn good. Aiden Hutchinson was a monster. Sam Laporta did well. Oh, and so did Brian Branch. And listen, the feud between the Lions fan base and myself, and also the Packers front office for not drafting Brian Branch, is pretty well known at this point. And I just feel like this Thursday, every single time that Brian Branch comes on the screen, it's going to look like this.
Jesus Christ, that's Jason Bourne.
Because he's been playing very, very well. The defense of the Lions has been a bright spot over the past 3 weeks. And going into this game, of course, that makes me a bit nervous. Meanwhile, the Packers scoring 18 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to win by a single point against the Saints. For about 3 quarters, they did not look good. The defense in that second half really buckled down. And of course, Derek Carr got injured. But the Packers offense started to step it up. Jordan Love found a rhythm, and all of a sudden, they were able to win the game. And it was really just an awesome moment for Jordan Love in his first start at Lambeau, and you just love to see it. And this game, the winner is going to be the leader of the NFC North for the time being, because we all know the Vikings and Bears aren't doing anything. And this is going to be a tough matchup. It seems like Aaron Jones and Christian Watson are going to be good to go this Thursday, or at least that's what the rumors are. We're going to still wait on David Bakhtiari, who I hope is able to play. Jair Alexander hopefully is ready to go as well. But this is going to be a dogfight. The Lions have been kicking the Packers' ass for the past couple of seasons. Of course, prevented them from going to the playoffs last year. And here, the Packers, they could get some revenge. I think this is going to be a great game, probably the best Thursday night game we've had so far, minus the first one. However, of course, you know what I'm doing, because I'm a homer about the Packers. I'm going with the Green Bay mother-loving Packers. If they have Aaron Jones, if they have Christian Watson, Jair Alexander, and hell, if Dave Bakhtiari comes back, I think they'll do enough to win. But as I said, I think it's going to be a battle. I would not be surprised if the Lions won, but we're going with the cheese. Then you got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Both these teams having some pretty bad losses last week. The Falcons, Bijan Robinson, stuffed, doing, the thing that the Packers defense couldn't do against him. And the Falcons just did not look great. They couldn't get anything going on offense, didn't score a single touchdown, and it was just kind of a messy day for them. Meanwhile, the Jaguars, it was bad last week, but the Jaguars' red zone offense is still...
The word I'm searching for, I can't say, because there's preschool toys present.
And it just seems like they're not in sync right now. The defense definitely has some moments where it's like, hey, they're pretty good, and then they have some moments where it's complete and totally head-scratching. And the Jaguars, they have the luxury of not being in the greatest division, but they need to pick it up because they are going to be playing some contenders this season. And if they want to make a playoff run, I know it's only week 4, they got to start getting it together. This is going to be a tough game for the Jaguars. I think it being played in Jacksonville is definitely helpful against the Falcons, but if the Falcons are able to establish that run game, this could be problematic. This game could go down to the wire. I'm going to give the slight edge to the Jaguars, and maybe they figure it out this week. Maybe their red zone offense can actually be existent, and Trevor Lawrence can get back on the right track. Following that, you have what is arguably the game of the week, and you got the Miami Dolphins taking on the Buffalo Bills. Well, the Dolphins, they played the Broncos. Big yikes, 70 points, something we haven't seen since the 60s. The Dolphins, even with Mike White in there, still scored 3 touchdowns. They were phenomenal. Their defense was good. Their offense was literally unstoppable. Whether it was Raheem Mostert, whether it was Achane, doesn't matter. They were able to get it done. Tyreek Hill, of course, ripping off a big one as well. Tua looking phenomenal. And this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. All offseason, I'm drafting Tua in every single league I can get my hands on him because I'm like, hey, if he looks like he did last year pre-injury, the Dolphins are going to be an insane team. And as I mentioned during Power Rankings, I love the Dolphins right now because they've won in different ways. They've won by throwing the ball week 1, running the ball week 2, and a combination in week 3. Meanwhile, the Bills have had back-to-back wins. They had 9 sacks against the Commanders last week. Their defense was looking real good. And hell, their offense looks to finally have found its groove again. Josh Allen, after a messy week 1 against the Jets, looks like he has returned to form. And this is going to be a game. Being played in Buffalo, I'm just excited to watch it. I will be streaming this game on Sunday. The Bills' defense, I think, could be a difference maker here, but as I said, the Dolphins can beat you in a multitude of ways. I am going to give the Dolphins the win here, though I would not be surprised if this turns into a shootout like it was with the Chargers and Dolphins week 1, but either way, I think we're in for a very good game. And if the Bills are able to come away with the W, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at them as Super Bowl contenders even more so after this week. Following that, you have this game. After just hyping up the Dolphins and Bills, you got the Denver Broncos taking on the Chicago Bears. Pretty much the 2 worst teams in the league going at it. And both these fan bases just attempting to describe the massacres that they saw last week.
Hellfire rained down on my house where my children sleep.
I need you to step back right now.
There were body parts in my yard.
Hellfire. It was ugly. The Bears, they got their ass kicked. They had 41 points scored on them by the Chiefs, and they have had a really rough 3 weeks. They just have not looked good, whether it's their DC leaving or whether it's the fact that their offense can't get anything going. The play calling is bad. Justin Fields doesn't look great. It's just a mess. Meanwhile, the Broncos, oh yeah, again, they had 70 scored on them. Nobody got fired. I don't know how Vance Joseph still has a job, and this is brutal. This is going to be a game of all time. And the winner of this game, they may avoid the first overall pick, but to be honest, I have no idea because both of these teams just don't look good. The Broncos, I'm going to give them a slight edge here because I think they're maybe a little bit more put together than the Bears right now. But yeah, this is basically like Alien versus Predator. Whoever wins, we lose. And in this case, I think the Broncos win. Following that, you got the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cleveland Browns in an AFC North showdown. The Ravens, the only team to lose in the AFC North last week, and it was just a mess. Lamar Jackson was pretty much doing everything, but the offense didn't get the job done. Of course, there was some referee interference that didn't look great. But overall, just a sloppy day. And on top of that, the Ravens are still dealing with injuries and new injuries keep on piling up. Not a great time. However, they did sign Kyle Van Noy, so maybe that will make a slight difference. I don't know, but they're taking on the Browns, who got a big win last week against the Titans, and their defense, especially Myles Garrett, was just insane. How insane? Well, this is basically what Derrick Henry looked like against that Browns defense. Not only were they able to get on Ryan Tannehill, but Derrick Henry had 20 yards rushing. And their offense, not perfect. Deshaun Watson looked a little bit better besides that backward pass. And I still think they're trying to figure it out. I think they'll be fine in the run game, even though, of course, Nick Chubb is out for the year. But they have some really good wide receivers. This game, I think, is going to be a good one. I am going to actually give it to the Cleveland Browns because arguably they have the best defense in football right now. And until proven differently and the Ravens can stay healthy, I got to give it to the Browns. Following that, you got a tale of two not-so-great offenses. You got the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Tennessee Titans. And don't tell anybody, but we did get a sneak peek at what both of these offenses are going to look like this Sunday. Yeah, the Bengals getting their first win of the season on Monday Night Football against the Rams, and Joe Burrow obviously playing injured, and he did not look great. He got a little bit more in rhythm as the game went along. Joe Mixon was at least there because the running game had been absent for the past 2 weeks prior. And it just looks like the Bengals offense, something is not right. Meanwhile, you look at the defense, their red zone defense was actually really good against the Rams. They would allow them to get into the red zone and then they would make a big stop, whether it was sacking Matthew Stafford as many times as they did or just being able to contain all of their weapons. And so I like that about the Bengals. Meanwhile, the Titans, rough game. Just mentioned how bad it was against the Browns, and Ryan Tannehill, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a change at quarterback coming in the next few weeks. It's just an ugly time there. Both of these teams do not like each other. They do have a rivalry, and I think this is probably going to be a very low-scoring game because you have two good defenses. I'm going to give the slight edge to the Bengals because besides their win against the Chargers, I just don't believe in the Titans offense enough. And Joe Burrow with another week to heal, hopefully he looks a little bit better. And because of that, I think Kitty will go meow. Then you got two teams who I would say have overachieved so far, and that is the LA Rams taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The Rams, as I mentioned before, losing, unfortunately, on Monday Night Football to the Bengals. And a big reason for that is because their offensive line, which had only allowed one sack heading into that game, basically just like opened the doors and was like, hey, come on in, defense. And it was a mess. Stafford still looked pretty darn good when he wasn't getting chased around. And again, they have a lot of weapons. They're obviously waiting for Cooper Kupp to come back. But they need to get something going. Their run game, not so great. Of course, Cam Akers going to Minnesota, and I imagine that Cam Akers and Sean McVay had this conversation before they shipped him off.
Share the load. Go home.
And meanwhile, the Colts, they got an impressive win over the Ravens with Gardner Minshew, and they actually had a run game, which was really nice to see. I've said overachieving for both these teams because I don't think a lot of people expected the Rams to be good. And for the Colts, especially without Anthony Richardson, I don't think anybody expected them to be good. But the Colts, they're showing that they're a pretty solid team, and they're going up against the Rams, who can be explosive. I am going to pick the Rams to get this win. Let's see if Anthony Richardson comes back. If Richardson comes back, I think the Colts will obviously have a better chance at getting the victory. But as of right now, assuming he's not going to play, I got to stick with Stafford and the Rams. They just got to hope their offensive line isn't paper this time. Then you have an NFC South showdown between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. The Bucs, well, they met a real defense in the Philadelphia Eagles because for 2 weeks, the Buccaneers defense, it looked legit. However, I had mentioned in last week's rankings that I didn't really believe in it because the level of competition they were playing wasn't so great. And on Monday night, yeah, that kind of was shown to be accurate. I will say, Mike Evans is still phenomenal. The Bucs, they tried to claw their way back. The Eagles, I think, are just a better football team. Meanwhile, you take a look at the Saints suffering a loss. Derek Carr is going to miss some time. Thankfully, it's not as serious as some expected, so it's not like he's going to miss the season, but they miss him. However, Alvin Kamara can finally come back. His suspension is over, and I think that will give a much-needed injection into that Saints offense. Of course, Chris Olave is a stud, but they're going to need a run game in order to do anything because it seems like they give up on that run game.
The way you describe it, they gave up pretty damn easy.
But this should actually be a pretty good game because I think both these teams match up well against one another. They obviously don't like each other very much. However, with a backup quarterback, I do think the Buccaneers definitely have an advantage here, even though they are getting Kamara back. But again, it is also his first week back. I am going to pick the Buccaneers to get the win here, though I imagine this is probably going to be a low-scoring, close game. Then you got an NFC East showdown between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Commanders, well, this is Sam Howell behind their offensive line. Not good. My main concern for the Commanders over these past few weeks has been offensive line because they haven't been able to protect Howell. And that became very, very apparent last week against the Bills because they had 9 sacks against the Commanders. And I think the Commanders are a solid football team. Their defense definitely can be really good, and they have some great weapons on that offense. But if you can't protect your quarterback, you can't do much with that. Meanwhile, the Eagles, while not necessarily looking like they were last year, still a really damn good football team. That defense is starting to gel together, especially with Jalen Carter. And that offense, I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to sell out to try and stop the run with DeAndre Swift, or are you going to try and cover their amazing receivers like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith? Either way, it's going to be a tough time. Here in Philadelphia, I think it's going to be a tough time for the Commanders, and I think the Eagles are going to be able to get the win. Following that, you have another matchup of 2 winless teams. Oh, it feels good to say that about the Vikings. You got the purple incarnation of Satan Minnesota Vikings taking on the Carolina Panthers. The Vikings, they can't stop turning the ball over. Kirk Cousins is having a really good season. Justin Jefferson is looking really good, but they basically have no run game to speak of. On top of that, they just are turning the ball over all the time. Their defense is solid. It's better than it was last year, but not elite by any stretch. And when your offense is doing all these great things, but they're turning the ball over and you're putting the defense on the field constantly, it's going to be tough to win games. Meanwhile, the Panthers, they're having offensive struggles. Their defense is looking good, but against Seattle, they couldn't get a whole lot done. I know that Andy Dalton filled in. He threw for nearly 400 yards, and it was admirable. Their defender got kicked out of the club by Charbonnet, but that's neither here nor there. And the other issue is that the Panthers team just really doesn't have an identity besides its defense, because Frank Reich, I don't know if he knows what he's doing.
Figure out what you do. You had all summer to think of it.
And I like Frank Reich a lot. I like the fact that he went to Carolina, but they just have some things that they need to figure out. Being played in Carolina, I still just don't believe in this Panthers offense, regardless of who's at QB. So I am going to give the Vikings their first win of the season, but I guarantee you, if the Vikings lose, it is going to be amazing. Following that, you got the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Texans. Both teams pulling off a win last week. The Steelers, their offense still doesn't look good. It's not. But their defense, very, very good. And Najee Harris played better than he did the first 2 weeks, but I just don't believe in him a lot. I like Warren a lot better. He just seems to be a little bit more of a fluid runner. But Kenny Pickett, he's serviceable right now. I'm just not a huge fan of their offense, and I know a lot of Steelers fans aren't either because every single time something goes wrong on offense, meanwhile, the Texans defeating the Glitter Kitties, the Jacksonville Jaguars, in a huge game. CJ Stroud, he's looking pretty good. And their offensive line, which is getting healthier, thankfully, because in the beginning of the season, it was decimated, and it showed. But CJ Stroud, that offensive line, as it's gotten healthier, he's been able to take strides, and he's been slinging that ball. So hold on, the Texans, they may have gotten their franchise QB. However, they don't really have much of a run game, and that's a little bit surprising with Pierce in the backfield. I'm hoping they're able to run the ball at some point because that will add another dimension to their offense. But overall, this could actually be a pretty close game. I am going to give it to the Steelers here, though, because their defense just looks really, really good right now. However, if the Texans are able to pull this off, you might see Matt Canada actually get sent to Canada. Then you got an AFC West showdown between the Vegas Raiders and the LA Chargers. The Raiders, if there's anything that Josh McDaniels can do to prepare better for this game than he did last week, it's probably watching this video.
The number of the day is 8.
Josh McDaniels electing to kick a field goal instead of going for the touchdown and the 2-point conversion when they were down 8. I could understand that maybe you trust your defense, but you could have trusted your defense to take care of it if it was a turnover on downs. Either way, it was messy. Jimmy Garoppolo threw a bunch of interceptions. The run game really not looking too good at all. They are ranked 32nd in the NFL. And to their credit, they've been playing some good defenses, except the Broncos week 1, but at least the Broncos looked better week 1. Meanwhile, the Chargers, they got their first win over the Vikings last week, and Justin Herbert was looking phenomenal. However, they should be thanking the Vikings because the Vikings bailed out Brandon Staley last week. On top of that, unfortunately, Mike Williams lost for the season, which is a big blow to that offense. However, that offense still has a bunch of weapons, and when they get Eckler back, I think that they will be just fine. I am going to pick the Chargers to win this game because even though their defense is not necessarily the greatest, I think their offense can definitely outscore the Raiders, and I imagine that's how it's going to go this Sunday. Then you got what is likely to be a defensive game. You got the New England Patriots taking on the Dallas Cowboys. The Patriots pulling off a win against the Jets. Low-scoring game. Did anybody expect differently? But they were able to get the job done. Their defense was able to lock down Zach Wilson, which just about any defense can do, except the Bills for whatever reason. And then you have Mac Jones, who again, I think can be good when he's not punching Sauce Gardner in the balls, but I think he can be good. It's just a matter of he needs a better O-line and he needs more weapons. Meanwhile, the Cowboys, they lost to the Cardinals.
That's what the kids call epic fail.
An embarrassing showing by the Cowboys. Micah Parsons still playing his tush off, but they were able to run on the Cowboys defense, and Josh Dobbs was able to have a pretty darn good day. And for the Cowboys, had a very costly turnover in the end zone with Dak throwing an interception. And listen, I don't think the Cowboys, it's not all doom and gloom, right? They will be fine. I still think they're going to make it to the playoffs. But we kind of expect this of the Cowboys almost every single year because whenever they look really, really good, we're just constantly waiting to go, okay, but when are they going to start to falter? And it happened in week 3. Now, maybe that will kind of wake them up a little bit as they take on the Patriots. And as I said, I think this is going to be a close defensive game, but this is an opportunity for the Cowboys to kind of right the ship a little bit. I do think the Cowboys will get the win because I think they can just put up more points than the Pats. And so because of that, Cowboys get their retribution. Then you got the Arizona Cardinals taking on the San Francisco 49ers. And listen, after watching Josh Dobbs and the Cardinals offense last week,
I owe you an apology. I wasn't really familiar with your game and how you travel.
Man, you're a casual.
I got to admit I was wrong. The Cardinals have been a chippy football team. They had a close game with the Commanders. They were leading big against the Giants before they eventually blew that lead. And I'm not trying to say the Cardinals are an amazing team, but when Kyler Murray comes back, I think they're going to be a competitive team. And considering what we're seeing around the NFL, they are far from the worst team in the league, like many, including myself, predicted. Meanwhile, you got the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, the Cardinals might be walking into a buzzsaw here. The 49ers, I mean, Brock Purdy didn't even have a great game, but they still were able to put up a bunch of points against the Giants. I know it is the Giants, but still, it is impressive. Christian McCaffrey is a monster. His streak of rushing touchdowns is absolutely insane. And on top of that, they have guys like Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, when he's healthy, Ayuk, and they're rocking and rolling. And of course, you have their defense. I do think that the 49ers should be able to put this game away. The Cardinals, they might make it a bit competitive, but overall, the 49ers are one of the best teams in football, and I imagine they're going to show that on Sunday. Then, on Sunday Night Football, we were supposed to get Patrick Mahomes versus Aaron Rodgers, which, by the way, we have never seen because something always happens. And now we're stuck with Patrick Mahomes versus Zach Wilson.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Yay. The Chiefs, as I mentioned before, had a blowout win against the Bears. Travis Kelce's now dating Taylor Swift, and it is creating the most memorable interactions between Swifties and diehard football fans, though I think there is some crossover on the internet, and it is a beautiful thing to behold. So yeah, the Chiefs, they're doing just fine. They found their offense last week. Meanwhile, the Jets, not getting as much media coverage anymore as Zach Wilson has taken over the team.
A, these things cost $800 a piece. B, you're not that interesting.
They did sign Trevor Siemian to the practice squad, and even though they're saying Zach Wilson is our guy, I would not be surprised if you see a change at QB come sooner rather than later, because that team is just too talented to have Zach Wilson it up. Sorry, Zach. Yeah, this is gonna be a game. The defense of the Jets, they're really good. Of course, I think they'll be able to get after Patrick Mahomes and limit that offense. I don't think the Chiefs are going to score 41, but yeah, the Chiefs are going to most likely win this game. Zach Wilson, I think his time is running out as the Jets QB, and Jets fans, you're going to be wondering what if all season. And listen, I get it. We didn't get a first round pick from you guys. Chiefs win. And then finally on Monday Night Football, you got the Seattle Seahawks taking on the New York Giants. The Seahawks, an impressive win over the Panthers last week. Geno Smith has really just turned into one of my favorite players. He was great last year, but just seeing him on the sideline with JSN and just kind of talking him up, you love to see that from a veteran guy talking to a rookie, and he's just so damn likable. Meanwhile, the Giants, another game in primetime, Giants fans. This has been you all year.
Bro, I'm straight up not having a good time.
And I've had to watch it too. The Giants didn't get their ass completely kicked by the 49ers, but it still wasn't great. And listen, Daniel Jones is doing the best he can out there. That offensive line is just absolutely atrocious. It's one of the worst in football, if not the worst. And for the Giants, until they can get that fixed, it's going to be problematic. Saquon Barkley seems to still be week by week, and the Giants better hope that they have him back for this game. The Seahawks are not the greatest team in the league, but they are definitely good enough to take down the Giants and get after Daniel Jones. So, that being said, I am going to give it to the Seahawks in what I think will be a closer game than maybe some of the other ones have been for the Giants. But yeah, Seahawks get the W. Giants, I don't know, man. Sorry. And so those are my picks for week 4. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who do you see getting the W's? Let me know. You know, I saw me at Tom Grossi Comedy, all social media see down below. A big shout and thank you to all the Patreon and YouTube members for supporting this channel. Thank you so very, very much. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.